Hey crew, we're going to go over the poetry unit test. I'm going to do a demonstration test, and then you guys are going to do your own practice test as homework. And so the first thing that you want to do is you want to go to modules and scroll down to this week's module. Now, on this one that I'm demonstrating, it's not published yet because I'm going to post the link to this video on the assignment as soon as I'm done with this video. But you'll see that you're going to make a copy of this poetry test document, and then you're going to read the Weary Blues by Langston Hughes and complete the practice test to the best of your ability. Okay, so I'm going to make a copy of this poetry test document, but then I'm actually going to demonstrate this assignment through the poem Ex-Basketball Player by John Updike, which is in your poetry packet. So I'm just going to call this all right, so I've made my copy of my poetry test. And the practice test is exactly the same as the regular test. It's just a list of terms, and you have to find examples of those terms within the poem. So I'm scrolling down. I think it's on page 6 is where I find Ex-Basketball Player by John Updike. And so the very first thing that I want to do, the very first thing that I want to do for the test is I want to make sure that I record the title and the poet, okay? So I'm going to make sure that I'm following that formatting for citing properly on the test, okay? This is important. Now, you are only working with one poem, so instead of putting the author's last name in parentheses, all you really need to do is put the line numbers in parentheses after the quote that you're using. So this is the first thing, though, I'm writing out. Remember, poems are always in parentheses, not parentheses, quotation marks. Ex-Basketball Player by John Updike. I've made sure I capitalized everything correctly. Everything's following correct format, okay? Okay, so the second thing that I want to do is I want to read through this poem all the way. And you'll see that I'll go over that actually here in just a minute. I'm going to read the poem all the way through first, and then we'll look at the directions. So, Ex-Basketball Player by John Updike. I'm just looking at the poem here. I have 5 stanzas. It's 30 lines long. So that must mean that each stanza is about 6 lines. All right. Pearl Avenue runs past the high school lot, bends with the trolley tracks, and stops cut off before it has a chance to go 2 blocks. At Colonel McComsky's Plaza, Berth's garage is on the corner facing west, and there, most days, you'll find Flick Webb, who helps Berth out. Flick stands tall among the idiot pumps, 5 on a side, the old bubblehead style, their rubber elbows hanging loose and low. One's nostrils are 2 S's, and his eyes an E and an O. The one is squat without a head at all, more of a football type. Once Flick played for the high school team, the Wizards. He was good. In fact, the best. In 46, he bucketed 390 points, a county record still. The ball loved Flick. I saw him rack up 38 or 40 in one home game. His hands were like birds, wild birds. He never learned to trade. He just sells gas, checks oil, and changes flats. Once in a while, as a gag, he dribbles an inner tube, but most of us remember anyway. His hands are fine and nervous on the lug wrench. It makes no difference to the lug wrench, though. Off work, he hangs around May's luncheonette, grease, gray, and kind of coiled. He plays pinball, smokes those thin cigars, nurses lemon phosphates. Flick seldom says a word to May, just nods beyond her face toward bright, applauding tiers of Necco wafers, nibs, and juju beads. Okay. So I've read through the entire poem. As I was reading, I kind of recognized a few devices that I could find right away. So I'm going to see if I can actually, this would be nice if I could split my screen. We'll see if it'll let me. Okay. So I have the poem and then I have my poetry test here. So I've got the title of the poem here. I'm going to answer the speaker question next here. I know the speaker is not Flick Webb himself, and I know I'm not supposed to put John Updike because he's the poet. So I'm going to say as much as I know about this speaker. This speaker narrates in third person limited. He or she seems to know the area and know Flick's history. Maybe this is one of Flick's like peers, went to high school with him or something. Okay, so I'm guessing here because I don't know exactly, but I can find evidence to back up all of these statements. And so that's really, as long as you're making, if you don't know exactly who the speaker might be, if you could back it up with evidence in the text, then it's fine. It's a legitimate answer. Okay, I'm going to leave theme for the end. I like to leave theme for the very end until after I have analyzed all these other things, okay? Because theme involves really thinking about what the poem might be trying to tell us, and it's better to look at the poem several times before you answer that question. Okay, so I also like to leave figurative language until I have figured out some of the others. So first of all, I'm going to start with simile because I found that right away. Right here, his hands were like wild birds. And there's no problem at all if you want to copy and paste. I like to hit Control-Shift-V, and then it copies into the document in the same format as the rest of the doc. So his hands were like wild birds. And remember, I'm citing this correctly, so it's in quotations. And this was line 16, 17, 18. Okay, now remember, I'm only working in one poem, so I don't need to put Updike 18. I can just put 18 for the line. You are absolutely not allowed to just put line 18, okay? I'm not going to go look at that poem and see if I can find the simile you were talking about. You need to make sure that you write out the simile, and that's up here in the directions as well. You must write out the example of the poetic device in the poem or none, okay? So if the device is not in there at all, then you write none. You can't just leave an item blank. We're trying not to use that same example twice. And then remember that we got to explain theme, speaker, allusion, volta, and symbol in complete sentences. For sound devices, we need to underline examples in each line that we use. So there's an example of alliteration. I use that because you guys all pretty much know what alliteration is. I'm not giving anything away there. So my soul may soar over the sun. I've underlined the S's there that make the same sound. Okay. So next, I'm going to, let's see here, find personification. Idiot pumps. It's talking about gas pumps, and gas pumps can't be idiots, right? They're not people. So idiot pumps, and that was line 7. Metaphor was a little bit more difficult to find, but I found it here at the end. Behind her face toward upright, applauding tears of Necco wafers, nibs, and jujubes. Remember, he was a basketball star, right? A high school basketball star. So he was used to seeing an audience play or cheer him on. And so he sees the tiers of the candy at May's luncheonette, kind of like you would see at the gas station. And they're arranged in the same way as the audience would be in the stadium. And so this is a metaphor, basically, except that it doesn't say that his stadium was applauding tiers of Necco wafers, nibs, and juju beads. Instead, that the second part of that metaphor is not there. So you have to kind of think about what that is supposed to mean. Okay, so this was 2 lines. Remember, I put my slash right there, beyond her face toward bright applauding tiers of Necco wafers, nibs, and juju beads. And these were lines 29 and 30. Okay, good on me. I've got 3 of these figurative language devices figured out. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I know there's no shift, okay? So I'm going to write none right now. I know that this is not in the poem. I read through it. I didn't see anywhere where it like shifted from one idea to the other. So that's definitely a no. The only onomatopoeia that I found was actually Flick's name, okay? Flick's name is an onomatopoeia. And I'll just use the first line that I saw Flick, which was line 6. Maybe you found another one and that's fine. There's no rhyme in this poem also. So that's easy. That's an easy one to fill out first as well. There's either rhyme or there's not. Okay, alliteration I found straight away while I was reading it. And this will happen, so you just have to hit enter if you get all wonky with the formatting. I found trolley tracks on line 2. So I've got this, and I've put the 2 in parentheses. Now what I need to do is I need to go back, and I need to underline the T's here at the beginning of the word, right? Trolley tracks is alliteration. There's a couple other examples of alliteration, but that one will work for me. Now I'm going to go to consonants because I found that one also while I was reading. This is why you should read your poem aloud, because you'll hear these things as you're reading them aloud. On line 4, it says Colonel Mikomsky Plaza. Okay, oops. So Colonel is that K sound that C's sometimes make. Then Mikomsky also makes that K sound. And then obviously this K makes that K sound too. So I had that repetition of that hard C sound or that K sound that C makes sometimes. Assonance was a little bit more difficult to find. I have to be honest that I didn't find this one until I was almost done analyzing this poem. I found dribbles and inner tube. And this is line 21. So right down here, as a gag, he dribbles an inner tube. And so remember, for me, what I noticed is the I in dribbles and the I in inner, they both make that I sound. Okay, and so I am underlining that. So you guys know I know all of the definitions of these words also. You are 100% allowed to use your notes, your poetry terms slideshow while you're filling this out. If you can't remember what assonance means or you need to look at an example of it, go ahead. You're 100% okay to do that. Okay, there's no repetition in this poem. Oops. Okay, so I have the back side done now. I need to go back and I need to look at what I'm missing. So I'm basically missing everything on the first page here. I didn't see any hyperboles. And I looked and looked and looked, and I just really do not see a paradox. So the poems that you guys will do for your actual tests and the one that you'll do for your practice test, The Weary Blues, has a lot more devices than this poem does. This one has a lot for sure, but it's got most of these other ones too. You'll have far fewer none answers than I do. Okay, allusion. You guys may not have gotten this, especially if you don't play basketball. The first time I read the poem, I'm not a basketball person. If you look at lines, what is this, 7 through 12, basically this entire stanza, this is an allusion to a basketball court, okay? The idiot pumps, there's 5 on a side, the old bubblehead style, their rubber elbows hanging loose and low, like a basketball player getting ready for the jump shot. Maybe I'm using the wrong terms there. You can make fun of me if I am, sorry. And then how, like, it looks like they have faces, it talks about. So I'm going to actually copy this entire stanza. And since I'm copying the entire stanza, I'm not going to put quotations around it because it's an extra long quote, but I am going to make sure that I put the line numbers at the end here. So it was 7 through 12. And remember, I have to explain the allusion, all right? So this alludes to a basketball court / game, okay? And then if I want to explain with the 5 pumps alluding to the 5 players. I always thought there were 6 players in basketball, but I guess there's only 5. Okay, so there's my allusion. I've explained it properly and all of that. I'm going to go back up and look at what else I'm missing. For a symbol, this one was a little bit difficult, but then I thought about how he holds the county record, and just the creation of a record and like the banner that you get with that and whatnot. It's a symbol of achievement, right? So I'm going to say the county record, and this is line 16, is a symbol of achievement. Okay. So I've gotten all the hard ones. Now I can go back to imagery and figurative language. Super easy. I could use like these first 2 lines right here, maybe the first 3 lines for imagery because it creates an image of the town. Don't forget to put the lines. And then for figurative language, there's not any plain figurative language, but there is a lot of personification. So I put the ball loved Flick, which was line 16. So if I look through now, I have everything filled out, including the things that don't exist in the poem. I've written none under those so that my teacher knows that I know what they mean and that I couldn't find them in the poem because they don't exist. And then now I'm ready to move on to theme, okay? Remember, this has to be a complete sentence. So I really thought that this story was kind of like about how a basketball star who lives in the past kind of grows up to live a sad life. Like he's just living in the past, kind of like Uncle Rico in Napoleon Dynamite. So I put living in the past can lead to a lonely future without much promise. And I thought that that was the theme of the poem. Maybe you thought something else, but that's what I got. And that's it. So you're going to do the same thing with the Weary Blues. You're going to do it on your own, though.